Hi, I'm Rudy Winston with Canon USA, and in this episode, we'll walk still image photographers through some of the EOS R camera's basic operations. We'll touch on both automatic exposure and working with the EOS R in manual exposure mode. This is an incredibly customizable camera, but I'm going to strongly recommend to anyone picking it up for the first time to return the camera to its default settings and learn its operations with that as your starting point. In fact, there's a setup menu option to clear all camera settings. And then in the custom functions menu area, separate menu entries to clear all custom functions and also to clear all customized button and dial settings. Then, once you have the basics under your belt, you can start to explore the possible customization options that'll work for you. Here are the primary controls for still image shooting on the EOS R camera. The main dial at the top is used to input primary settings like changing an aperture in aperture priority mode or moving from one menu screen to the next. In manual mode, this is where you'll change your shutter speed. For the most part, it's like the main dial on current EOS digital SLRs. The quick control dial is now at the top of the camera, facing rearward. This is your exposure compensation dial in automatic exposure modes like program or aperture priority. In manual mode, this is the default location for aperture adjustment. You don't need to press a button first. Just rotate the dial with your thumb. Press the mode button and then turn the same quick control dial to pick an exposure mode. You can do this with the camera at your eye and see the choices in the viewfinder. Want to set a video recording mode? Press the mode button first, then press the info button to see video shooting mode choices. The basic default way to move your AF points is to press the rear AF point button and then press any of the four-way cross keys to manually move an AF point up, down, left, or right. This applies to expanded groups of AF points as well to focus on off-center subjects. In addition, you can move AF points by just tapping the touchscreen LCD monitor. In a previous video, we spoke of how the more compact mirrorless camera has less room for external buttons and dials. So some differences in control layout you'll see compared to EOS digital SLRs include: the quick control dial is moved from the back to the top of the camera. The four cross keys buttons are used for AF point movement, menu navigation, and so on. There's no 8-way multi-controller on the back. Overall access to controls is different. Let's look a little more deeply at that last point. With many previous Canon EOS cameras, you often pressed a button and turned a dial to change settings or access a feature. With the EOS R, many of those buttons aren't there. And this is one of the keys to working with this camera: quickly accessing settings like ISO when there's no button you can see on the camera. So here's where to find the basic everyday controls many of you use frequently. First option for basic exposure settings like ISO. Use the touchscreen interface on the camera's LCD monitor. At the default settings, if you pull your eye away from the viewfinder, the LCD monitor quickly becomes active. If the larger on-screen buttons aren't visible on the LCD, press the info button to cycle through the displays until they are. The second option, press the multi-function button near the shutter button. Now, turn the rear dial to select the features that previously were often accessed by buttons on the top panel, like choosing your AF operation setting, your single frame or continuous drive, and your metering pattern. It's another way to access your ISO. Turn the front dial to actually change a selected setting, even with the camera at your eye. The third place to look, the quick control menu. Press the Q button or tap the Q icon on the LCD monitor and a screen with many control options appears. Finally, for more detailed settings like customizing the camera and so on, press the menu button and go into the camera's full menu screens. The good news here, if you're already a Canon shooter, is that the EOS R's menus are quite similar to those in other recent Canon EOS DSLRs. There is also a pair of extremely cool new controls. Canon's RF lenses will each have a click-stopped ring on the front of the barrel called a control ring. Out of the box, it's not active, but it can be easily customized for quick access to exposure adjustments. And there's a touch-sensitive multi-function bar on the back of the camera. Again, it's not active by default, but you can program this to allow immediate access to numerous features with a tap at either end, or slide your thumb lightly across its surface to run through a progression of feature changes or adjustments. We'll have a separate episode to explore the possibilities. So let's look at operating the EOS R for typical picture taking. First, let's say you're an experienced camera enthusiast and you normally work in AV mode. Here are the basic ways you'd likely start working with the EOS R camera. Press the mode button and turn the quick control dial to select your shooting mode. Again, this can be done with the camera at your eye using the electronic viewfinder. Turn the main dial to select an aperture for AV mode. Working in shutter priority, you set the shutter speed with the main dial as well. This is very similar to how EOS DSLRs operate. Use the quick control dial to set any exposure compensation. Press the AF point button on the back of the camera, and then use the 4-way cross keys to manually move an AF point to a different location. You can also tap the LCD monitor when the camera's away from your eye to do this. If you shoot manual, the only real differences are that the main dial sets your shutter speed, and the rear quick control dial sets your aperture. Input your ISO either by the touchscreen or by pressing the small multifunction button, selecting ISO with the quick control dial, and then use the main dial to input an actual ISO setting. Working with the EOS R is different than Canon's digital SLRs, but with a little practice, the basic shooting functions for both manual mode shooters and those who prefer auto exposure should be pretty easy to get accustomed to. But I repeat, it's probably best to begin learning this camera at the factory default settings. Later, experiment with all the customization that's possible. And believe me, it's extensive. We mentioned 2 totally new controls: the control ring on the RF lenses and the multifunction bar. We'll look at those in our next episode. See you there.